Next week, move it all. She will not even have time to understand what happened. I heard my husband say that in Spanish in the middle of the party celebrating 15 years since his company was founded. Warm yellow lights, a red carpet, the sound of glasses clinking. And on the stage he had just thanked me, the wife who had been by his side every step of the way. Right behind me he was discussing a plan to transfer his shares into the name of a senior employee, to pull money out of our joint investment fund, to complete everything before filing for divorce. She does not understand a single word. That is what he said. He thought I did not speak Spanish. He had calculated everything carefully. Assets, timing, paperwork, custody. He only got one thing wrong. The woman he intended to remove from the board understood the law better than he thought. That night was the celebration of my husband's company's 15th anniversary. A large hotel downtown, red carpet, warm yellow lights, soft music playing steadily. Around 40 people were there. Business partners, a few members of the executive team, both sides of the family, close friends. The atmosphere felt familiar. Firm handshakes, loud laughter, talk about growth and vision as if everyone were standing inside a framed milestone moment. I stood near the drink station holding a glass of sparkling water. I am always the one who drives at events like this. I prefer to keep my mind clear, especially when the people around me begin talking more after their second drink. I saw my husband across the room, dark blue suit, deep red tie, confident stance. He was standing close to the company's new marketing director. She was Colombian, tall, sharp, with eyes that knew exactly how to look at someone. I caught fragments of her speaking in Spanish. "Are you sure?" My husband smiled slightly, lowered his voice, then answered in Spanish, "By next week, everything will be transferred. She will not even have time to understand whose hands the paperwork has already passed through." She laughed. "Are you sure?" He replied, "She does not understand a single word." I stood a few feet away from them, right by the drink station, where the music echoed off the wall and softer voices carried more clearly. Just enough distance for them to believe I could not hear. Just enough for every word to land directly in my ears. I was born in San Antonio. My father is Mexican. In our house, my mother spoke English at the front door and Spanish in the kitchen. It was the first language I spoke, the language I used when I called my grandmother, the language I think in when emotions rise. So I understood every word. By next week, everything will be transferred. She will not have time to understand what happened. She does not understand a single word. I did not step forward. I did not interrupt. I did not place a hand on his shoulder like in some late-night drama. I just stood still for 1 second. Then 2. In my mind, I saw the evenings I sat at the dining table reviewing the books while he said, "I am exhausted. Can you take a look for me?" I remembered the money I withdrew from my personal savings account to help his company survive its difficult second year. I remembered the house we live in, titled in both our names, but the down payment came from my family's funds. Transfer it. Transfer what? Transfer where? Transfer before anyone knows. The marketing director leaned closer and asked softly, "So what will you tell her afterward?" My husband replied in a firm voice, "She will not have any choice." At that moment, applause broke out. The host invited him up to speak. He adjusted his tie, turned to her, and this time in English said, "Give me a minute." Then he walked onto the stage. "Thank you all for being here," he said into the microphone, his voice warm. "The past 15 years have not been easy, but with the support of my family, of my wife," he looked down into the crowd to find me. I smiled. "That is how I stand here today." The whole room applauded. If anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed my smile was not the same as in previous years, not wider, not colder, just steadier. I raised my glass, turned to the woman beside me, and said quietly, "He always knows exactly what to say at the right moment." She laughed and said, "You must be very proud." I replied, "Oh, I always listen very carefully." When he stepped down from the stage and walked past me, he asked softly, "Are you okay?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I heard very clearly." He did not understand what I meant. He simply nodded, confident as always. He believed another language was the perfect cover. He believed I was standing there as nothing more than a wife attending a party. He did not know that the most dangerous thing in that room was not what he said, but that I understood every word and chose to stay silent. Because sometimes the strongest response is not to argue. It is to remember. If you have ever been underestimated just because you were quiet, stay with me. This story is not over. That night I heard my husband's entire plan. Not fragments, not guesses. I did not leave the drink station right away. I stood there long enough for them to lay out the full sequence. I heard every sentence, every detail, in the very language he believed I did not understand. He was preparing to transfer his shares to another company, a company registered under his sister's name. A family name, clean, perfectly legal on paper. At a glance, it looked like internal restructuring. If you looked closely, it was clearing the path. He was also preparing to withdraw money from our joint investment fund, the fund we opened when our son started kindergarten. The fund I used to jokingly call our Sleep Well Fund because it helped me rest on nights when the market was volatile. The money in it was not just profit. It was 10 years of savings, year-end bonuses, the extra amounts I added whenever I closed a consulting contract. And the final piece was his plan to file for divorce after the assets were safe. He used that exact word, safe. Safe for whom I am not sure, but certainly not for me. I stood there between the music and the clinking glasses, listening to him talk about my life like it was a line item on a balance sheet. No emotion, no hesitation, just something to be rearranged neatly. But what made my blood run cold was not the money. He said I was unstable. He said it in a firm tone, as if he were describing the weather. He said he would use that to gain custody. That I was too sensitive. That I was overly emotional. That I was not steady enough. I gave birth in a public hospital during the coldest winter that year. I woke up every 2 hours for the first 6 months. I took our son to dental appointments, vaccinations, parent-teacher conferences, while he traveled for business and posted photos from first-class lounges on social media. I do not remember ever being unstable while working remotely, cooking dinner, and signing permission slips for our son's youth soccer team. But, in his version of the story, I was the problem. I heard him say that once everything was transferred, once the shares were under his sister's name, once the joint investment fund was no longer significant, he would file for divorce. That at that point I would have no choice. That the court would look at his clean financial record and my so-called emotional instability and then make a decision. I did not tremble. I did not step forward. I did not drop my glass like in a late-night television drama. I just took a slow breath. I thought about the evenings I reviewed tax filings while he said, "You are better at these details than I am." I thought about the fact that I kept the passwords to our investment accounts, that I tracked every small shift in the market, that I called the financial advisor whenever I noticed an unusual transaction. He said I was unstable. Yet I was the only person in the house who made a habit of reading every contract before signing. I was the one who kept copies of every document in a separate drawer, organized by year and by type, a habit some people call obsessive. This was not just about money, not just about shares, not just about an investment fund. This was about my son. He did not just want to leave the marriage. He wanted to walk away with safe assets and our son in his hands, leaving me behind with the image of a difficult woman who could not control herself. I heard his entire plan in a room full of people celebrating his success. It all unfolded between soft music and the scent of expensive perfume. I said nothing, because in that moment I understood something very clearly. He believed I did not understand the language he was speaking. He believed I could not see the numbers he was moving. He believed I would only react after everything was finished. He calculated many things. He miscalculated one. I heard all of it. He always thought I was just a housewife. The way he spoke about me in front of others was polished, polite, like a compliment wrapped in sugar. He would often say, "My wife stays home with the kids. She is not really into business." People would nod, give a polite smile, and I would smile too. In my 40s, I have grown used to letting other people make their assumptions about me. But there are a few things he does not know, or more accurately, never cared to know. He thinks I am just a homemaker. But I was the one who invested the first dollars into his company. Back then, we did not have a polished office, no staff, just an idea and a savings account I had built from my years working full-time. I remember that afternoon clearly, sitting at the dining table, opening my laptop, transferring the money. He said it was only temporary, that once the company stabilized, he would pay it back. I nodded, because at that time, we were a team. He thinks he built everything from zero. In reality, that zero had an extra zero behind it, and it came from me. He thinks the house we live in is a symbol of his success. But the house is titled in both our names and every transaction record. The down payment, the purchase documents, I handled personally. When we signed the paperwork to buy the house, he was traveling for business. I was the one sitting with the realtor, reading every page of the contract. I was the one who wired the down payment, the one who asked detailed questions about the interest rate, the one who kept copies of the documents in the filing cabinet in my office. He likes to tell the story of this house at parties, and I know exactly which signatures it was built on. He thinks I do not understand money, but I am the one who keeps all the tax records. I am the one who sits with the accountant every tax season, reviewing every number before filing. I know how much the company makes, how much it spends, and where the cash flow goes. I know better than anyone that financial decisions are not just ideas on paper. They carry real legal consequences. He thinks I just stay home, but I am the one who holds the most important things. And the most important thing he does not know at all is that I recorded that party. I am not the type of person who walks around prepared for war. I do not carry a recording device in my purse as a habit. But that night, when I heard him say in Spanish that everything would be transferred before I had time to understand what was happening, I simply opened my phone and pressed record. Not for drama, not to retaliate immediately, only because I understood that if things ever reached a courtroom, words without evidence are nothing but air. I left my phone in my purse, screen face down, and let it record everything. The soft music, the clinking glasses, the marketing director's laughter, and his voice saying I would not know what was about to hit me. I did not interrupt. I did not make him suspicious. I simply let the truth run like a tape. At this age, I have learned something many people only understand after paying a price. Calm is not weakness. Sometimes it is strategy. He believed I was just a woman standing on the sidelines of his success. He believed I did not understand the language he was using, did not understand the numbers he was moving, did not understand the plan he was laying out. He believed I would only react when it was too late. What he does not know is that I did not just understand. I prepared. And while he was planning to transfer shares, withdraw money from our joint investment fund, and label me unstable to gain custody, I was sitting at that table, smiling as usual and preserving every detail. Not to create a scene. Not to humiliate him in front of the crowd, but so that if one day I had to stand before a judge, I would not speak with emotion. I would speak with evidence. After that party, I did not do what most people would expect. I did not storm into the bedroom to confront him. I did not go through his phone. I did not throw anything across the living room. At this age, I am too tired for loud scenes. I did not confront him. I behaved like a wife who was a little worried, a little sensitive, but ultimately still trusted her husband. The next morning, while he was making coffee in the kitchen as if nothing had happened, I walked downstairs with slightly red eyes. I did not need much acting. I had not slept much anyway. I said softly, "Maybe I overthought things last night." He looked at me, slightly surprised, then relaxed. "You are imagining things again." I nodded and wiped the corner of my eye. "I am sorry for being suspicious. I have been a little stressed lately." He set his coffee mug down and exhaled like a man who had just taken on a bit more female emotion. "I just want everything to be stable. Stable." The words sounded beautiful in a kitchen that smelled like morning toast. I sat across from him, my hands intertwined as if I needed support. "If you think we need some additional agreement to make things clearer, I am willing to sign." He looked at me more closely. "What do you mean?" I said, "If you want to add a post-nuptial agreement about assets in the company, to protect the company or something like that, I will sign. I do not want to become an obstacle for you." I saw clearly the moment he believed he had won. His shoulders relaxed, his voice softened, the kind of soft tone of someone who has just confirmed that his plan is still moving in the right direction. "I just want everything to be transparent," he said. So later, no one feels cheated. I gave him a faint smile. I understand. In truth, I understood far more than he thought. In the days that followed, I played the role of a woman afraid of losing her husband. I asked a little more. I stayed quiet a little more. I stopped touching the financial files in front of him. I let him believe I was stepping back. And when a man believes you have stepped back, he usually steps forward even further. One evening, he sat in the living room talking to his sister on the phone. This time, he did not lower his voice as much as before. He switched to Spanish again, naturally, as if I did not exist in the room. He said that I had agreed to sign the additional agreement, that everything was going according to plan, that once the remaining portion was transferred, it would be done, that at that point everything would be completely safe. I was sitting in the armchair pretending to scroll through my phone. I did not look up. I did not react. I just let my phone rest on my lap, screen face down, the recording app already open. His voice was clear, every sentence, every word, no longer vague fragments like at the party. This time it was detailed. It was sequential. It was the confidence of a man who believed he controlled the entire board. He said, "She thinks it is just a formality." He laughed. I listened to my own breathing, steady. Not faster, not heavier. I am past the stage of wanting to scream so people will hear me. I only pressed stop when the call ended. The second recording. He thought I was afraid. He thought I was trying to hold on to a marriage that was cracking. He thought I agreed to sign so I would not lose him. What he did not know was that I had not signed anything. I simply let him believe I would, so he would keep talking. One day, before he planned to sign the share transfer, I sat in my car in the parking lot outside the county courthouse, my hands resting on the steering wheel a few seconds longer than usual. Not because I was hesitating, but because I understood that from this moment on, nothing would ever go back to the way it was. I had 2 recordings. I had the money trail. I had copies of the transfer documents that were being prepared, and most importantly, I had an attorney who understood exactly what was happening. We did not make noise. We did not send warning letters. We did not make threatening calls. In America, if you want something to carry real weight, you do it with paperwork. I filed an emergency motion with the court, a motion to freeze assets, a petition to investigate fraud, a request to review custody. No emotion, no storytelling, just facts, just dates, just evidence. My attorney told me that when a court sees the risk of assets being moved before a divorce, they respond quickly, not because of my feelings, but because the law does not look kindly on last-minute money transfers. That afternoon, the judge signed the order. I was not there when he found out, but I know exactly when it happened. He was at the company's law office. The shares were ready to be transferred. His sister was prepared to sign. Everything had been arranged according to the plan he laid out in Spanish in front of me, believing I did not understand. The bank received the freeze order. The transaction was blocked immediately. The system automatically locked the transfer. The other attorney received electronic notice before the pen even touched the paper. I received a message from my lawyer just minutes later. The transfer has been stopped. I could imagine his face in that moment. The man who always believed he was one step ahead suddenly realizing the board had been turned. Later I was told he said there must have been some mistake, that the banking system glitches sometimes, that this would be resolved quickly. But there was no mistake. There was a court order. There was a fraud investigation file. There was a motion to review custody based on evidence that he had intentionally attempted to move assets and portray me as unstable. I did not call him that night. I did not text to ask whether the signing had gone smoothly. I stayed home as usual, cooked a simple dinner, cleared the table, checked our son's homework. From the outside, everything looked completely normal. The kind of normal our neighbors see every day when they walk past. Around 8 that evening, he walked into the house. The door closed a little harder than usual. He looked at me without greeting. "What did you do?" I looked up from the table and set my pen down. "I filed with the court." He let out a dry laugh, the kind of laugh someone makes when they do not believe what they just heard. "You froze your own assets," I said. "I froze our joint assets. Before you moved them." He was silent for a second. Then 2. For the first time since the party, I saw that he was no longer certain. "You do not understand what is going on," he said. I looked straight at him. "I understand more than you think." I did not need to mention the recordings. I did not need to repeat the words he spoke in Spanish. I did not need to explain why I filed exactly 1 day before he planned to sign. At this age, I do not argue to win words. I win with timing. A freeze at the 89th minute is not an impulsive act. It is the result of listening, remembering, and choosing the right moment. He calculated carefully. He just calculated based on the wrong assumption, that I would react emotionally. Instead, I reacted legally. And in this country, once paperwork is signed and sealed, emotion is no longer the deciding factor. The emergency meeting was called for Monday morning, not because I sent an anonymous letter, not because someone in the company suddenly grew a conscience, but because the court had issued a formal notice regarding suspected fraud in the transfer of shares. In America, when the court sends official paperwork, people sit up a little straighter. The conference room on the 12th floor had a long table, leather chairs, glass windows overlooking the parking lot, and beyond that, the busy highway. The air felt heavy, like year-end meetings when revenue falls short of projections. The only difference was that this time the problem was not the market, it was internal. I walked in with my attorney. No evening gown, no statement jewelry, just a simple business suit, hair tied back neatly. The kind of outfit you wear when the conversation is about documents, not emotion. They were already seated. The executive team, the chairman of the board, the company's legal counsel, and him. On the table sat a thick file stamped by the court. Notice of suspected asset diversion. Motion to review potential fraudulent conduct prior to divorce. Dry language, but powerful enough to shift the standing of a man in the company he founded. No one raised their voice. No one pounded the table. This was not primetime television. This was a boardroom accountable to shareholders. The chairman spoke first. "We received notice from the court regarding a recent share transfer." His voice was calm but sharp. "We need clarification." He sat upright, both hands on the table. "This is a personal matter," he said. "A misunderstanding in the marriage. A misunderstanding." I almost laughed, but I have trained myself to keep a neutral face in moments like that. Years of company events taught me how. My attorney placed another copy of the file on the table. The court notice references suspected asset transfers intended to avoid financial obligations in a divorce. No one looked at me then. They looked at the paperwork. He exhaled, slightly impatient. "My wife does not even understand Spanish. She is speculating." The sentence landed on the table like a small stone, but it was enough to create a ripple. "My wife does not even understand Spanish." The entire room turned toward me. It was a brief moment, but long enough for me to catch the chairman's expression. Not siding with anyone. Assessing credibility. I did not rush. I did not speak immediately. I simply placed both hands on the table and looked directly at him. Then I answered in Spanish, clearly and fluently. "I understood every word you said. Entendí cada palabra." I did not raise my voice. I did not emphasize anything. Just enough for everyone in the room to hear. The room went silent. The kind of silence that follows when someone realizes they misjudged a person. The kind of silence when a narrative shifts without anyone needing to shout. I did not elaborate on what he had said. I did not repeat each sentence. I did not need to. My attorney opened the file and cited the portions related to the share transfer plan, the timing of the transaction, and the asset freeze order. Everything was presented chronologically. No emotion. No theatrics. He was no longer leaning back comfortably. His shoulders tightened. His hand gripped the pen. The chairman nodded slowly. "We will need to review this carefully. The company cannot be associated with any conduct that suggests fraud. It was not a condemnation, but it was not support either." I sat there without triumph, without satisfaction. At this age, I understand that real victories often unfold in silence. He once believed I did not understand the language he used to plan. He once believed I was just a wife standing on the sidelines of major decisions. In that boardroom, no one believed that anymore. And sometimes what makes a room fall silent is not a shout. It is a sentence spoken at the right time. He used to say I was unstable. He said it enough times that he believed it would become a legitimate label in my file. In his plan, I was the overly emotional woman, lacking control, not steady enough to raise a child on my own. A convenient description when you want leverage in a divorce. The custody hearing took place in a courtroom smaller than I expected. No audience, no noise, just wooden tables, straight-backed chairs, and the steady voice of the court clerk reading the record. The kind of room where every word carries weight. I sat beside my attorney. My hands rested on the table, not shaking. I had prepared for this moment from the first day I heard him call me unstable. I knew that in that courtroom, emotion is not evidence. His attorney repeated the same argument, that I was too sensitive, that I tended to overreact, that a more stable environment for our son would be with him, with higher income and a structured schedule. It sounded reasonable on paper. My attorney did not argue louder. She placed a small device on the table and said, "We would like to present a recording." In that recording, his voice was clear. Not the voice he used before the board, not the voice he used to reassure investors. His real voice, speaking casually. The line came from the phone call with his sister, the call he thought I was just scrolling on my phone in the armchair. "She will never survive alone." It was not a comment about finances, not concern for our child. It was a declaration that I was dependent, that I was weak, that I could not function without him. The courtroom was not noisy after that sentence, but I saw the judge's eyes shift, not anger, attention. The judge asked his attorney if he wished to explain the context of that statement. His attorney tried to redirect, saying it was just a remark made under stress, that it should not be overinterpreted as a single line. But in custody matters, attitude matters as much as income. Judges do not look favorably on men who dismiss their wives as incapable of independence. Especially when the record shows I managed the household finances, made the initial investment in the company, held title to the house, and handled our son's care down to the smallest details. I did not need to speak much. I answered questions directly. I described my son's routine, who handles drop-off and pick-up, who attends parent-teacher conferences, who monitors his schoolwork. No drama, just reality. The kind of reality any parent between 30 and 55 understands. When the judge announced the temporary ruling, her voice was calm. Primary custody would lean toward me. He retained visitation rights on a schedule, but primary decision-making authority regarding our son's finances, tuition, insurance, and future investments would no longer be in his hands. He did not react dramatically. He did not stand up. He did not shout. But I saw the tension tighten in his jaw. In his plan, I was the one who would panic at the mention of court. I was the one who would fear losing our child. I was the one who would sign anything to avoid trouble. Reality was different. I did not win by humiliating him. I won by letting his own words reveal his attitude. At this age, I no longer care about proving strength to anyone. I care about protecting my child using the legal tools the system provides. He once said I would not survive alone. In that courtroom, I did not argue against it. I let the judge's decision answer for me. I did not go online. I did not write a long post on social media. I did not tag anyone, did not tell the story in half-truths and vague hints so people could speculate. At this age, I no longer believe in public exposure as a solution. I did not need a scandal. I did not need to smear anyone. I simply let the system do its job. Court records are public documents. Anyone who knows how to look can read them. The motion to freeze assets. The request to investigate fraud in the transfer of shares. The attached exhibits. The recording. The timestamp showing when the transaction was blocked. It is all there. Dry, clear, without emotion. In business, a reputation does not collapse because of an angry post. It collapses when partners see legal risk. I did not send the file to the board. The court did that. I did not call shareholders. Their attorneys received official notice. I did not tell mutual friends. News spreads the way it always does in small circles. A week after the hearing, I heard that his nomination for the official chief executive position had been withdrawn, not because someone disliked him, not because I lobbied behind the scenes, but because a company preparing to hand its highest role to a man facing allegations of asset diversion and legal disputes over shares is taking too great a risk. At first, he said it was only a delay, that the board wanted to wait for things to settle. But in business, when a nomination is pulled, it rarely returns intact. I did not celebrate. I did not open champagne in the kitchen. I still drove our son to school in the morning, still stopped at the grocery store for milk and eggs as usual. On the outside, life did not change much. Only one thing changed. The eyes of those who once looked at him with absolute certainty now held a question. The record of suspected asset diversion became part of his legal profile. Not a criminal charge, but enough to make attorneys more cautious, enough to make investors ask for explanations, enough to make banks review credit limits. A reputation does not explode overnight. It cracks along fine lines, beginning with official language. And the woman who once stood beside him at that party, the one who laughed when he said I did not understand a single word, disappeared from company events very quickly. Once she understood he might face civil litigation tied to pre-divorce asset transfers, she stopped appearing in shared photos. I did not call her. I did not send a warning message. I did not need to. Adults understand one thing. When someone may be facing civil litigation, your name should not appear too close. He believed I would be the first to collapse. That I would panic, cry, make a scene, turn myself into a cautionary tale. Reality moved in the opposite direction. I did nothing except file properly and remain calm. No online scandal, no smear campaign, just public records, just documentation of suspected asset fraud, just a withdrawn executive nomination, just a relationship that stepped away when legal risk appeared. At this age, I understand that the greatest collapse does not come from noise. It comes from the silence of those who once stood beside you. The official trial took place on a cold morning, the kind of morning when you carry a coffee to go and remind yourself to breathe steadily before walking through the metal doors of the courthouse. No audience, no cameras, just dark wood, the national seal mounted behind the judge's bench, and people who understood that words spoken today would carry legal consequences. I sat on the left beside my attorney. He sat on the right with his legal team. The distance between us was not far, but it was enough to show we were no longer on the same side. The judge turned page after page of the file. Her voice was calm, but not distracted. The questions were not asked for drama, only for clarity. When it came to the recordings and the transfer of shares, the judge looked up at him. Why did you believe your wife did not understand what you were saying? The question was not harsh, but it was direct. He sat up a little straighter. His voice tried to hold its usual confidence. She does not speak Spanish. Then he repeated it in English, clearly, as if it were an obvious truth. She does not speak Spanish. I had heard that sentence before. At the party, in the boardroom, and now in a courtroom. I did not rush to respond. At this age, I understand that in court, timing matters more than volume. My attorney did not jump in. She simply gave a slight nod in my direction. I looked at him, not with anger, not with tears, just a steady, clear look, the same way I look at a balance sheet when reviewing every number. Then I spoke. I understood everything. I paused for a moment. I was just waiting for you to finish. The room did not erupt after that. There was no whispering. But the silence grew heavier, the kind of silence when people realized the story they believed had a major gap. The judge looked at me, then at him. You are saying you understood the entire content. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. There was no need for a long explanation, no need to repeat every word he said. The recording was already in the file. My attorney had submitted the transcript. Everything was in the record. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then stopped. Perhaps for the first time he understood that this was no longer a private matter between husband and wife. It had become a question of his credibility before the court. The judge made notes for a moment. Then she said, assuming your spouse did not understand and acting on that assumption to execute significant financial decisions was a lack of sound judgment. Lack of sound judgment is a very polite way of describing a series of miscalculations. I did not feel triumphant. There was no cinematic sense of victory, just a quiet confirmation that truth, when placed in the right setting, carries its own weight. He once believed I did not understand the language he used. He once believed I would react emotionally, panic, make noise, and weaken myself. Instead, I sat still. I listened. I recorded. and I waited for him to finish speaking. In that courtroom, no one shouted. No one was escorted out. There was only a simple question, a clear answer, and a silence long enough to shift the outcome. Sometimes the strongest move is not what you say. It is letting someone else speak, believing you do not understand, then proving that you understood everything. A few months after the trial, life did not explode into some bright new chapter like in a Friday night movie. It returned to a normal rhythm, and it was that normal rhythm that made me realize everything had truly changed. He moved out as soon as the court order took effect, a rental apartment downtown, neat, fully furnished, but not the house he once proudly showed to business partners. I said nothing about where he lived. I did not need to. Reality spoke for itself. As for me, I stayed in the old house, the house that had been in my name from the beginning. The balcony still faced the front yard, where the maple tree turns color every fall. I often stood there in the evenings after clearing dinner, looking down at the familiar street. The neighbors still walked their dogs, children still rode their bikes in circles. Life was not louder, just clearer. One afternoon, my son stood beside me on the balcony. He looked down at the yard, then looked up at me and asked in a natural voice, the kind of question a child asks that is not naive at all. "Mom, why did not you tell Dad that you understood?" I did not answer right away. I looked at him for a moment. He had witnessed more than a child should, even though I tried to keep everything civil. I did not speak badly about his father in front of him. I only told the truth when necessary. I rested my hands on the railing and felt the late-day breeze. I thought about that party, about the silent boardroom, about the courtroom, about the moment he repeated that I did not speak Spanish. Then I answered, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone believe they are smarter than you. He was quiet for a few seconds, as if weighing that sentence. Then he nodded and did not ask more. Children sometimes understand more than we think. I did not tell him that if I had confronted his father that night, he might have changed the plan. I did not explain that if I had reacted emotionally, I could have lost legal ground. I did not talk about meetings with lawyers, about the nights I sat reviewing files after everyone was asleep. I only said one sentence, enough for him to understand how I chose to act. He once believed I was weak. He believed I did not understand the language he used to plan. He believed I would react like a wounded woman instead of someone who knows how to wait for the right moment. I did not scream to prove I was intelligent. I did not need to stand in the middle of a boardroom and announce that I was born in San Antonio, that Spanish was the first language I spoke. I simply let him keep talking, keep believing, keep moving further into his own plan. And when everything was clear enough, I used his own words to protect myself. Life afterward was not a loud victory. It was quiet mornings making coffee in a silent kitchen. It was reviewing investment accounts that now carried only my name and my son's. It was attending parent-teacher conferences alone, without feeling the need to prove anything. I am not saying it did not hurt. There are nights when I still lie awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about 15 years of marriage and wondering what changed. But I no longer wonder whether I am capable of living on my own. He once said I would not survive alone. A few months later, I stood on the balcony of my house with my son beside me, and I already knew the answer. Sometimes, you do not need to prove you are smarter. You only need to stay calm enough to let someone believe they are. Then let the truth do the rest. Do not react emotionally when someone is calculating against you. Calmly gather evidence. Use the law and timing to protect yourself and your child. Silence is not weakness. The right kind of silence is strategy. If you have ever been underestimated or outmaneuvered in a marriage, comment the word TINS and remember to subscribe to the channel for the next part.